Good evening. I welcome you to our online class this evening. And please, if you can hear me clearly, just drop your comments. Throughout the semester, we've been able to engage ourselves studying the field of psychology. And in the beginning, we started by examining what we mean by psychology. You know, the mind. If you can hear me clearly, please drop your comments. And as I explain these issues, you try as much as possible to drop your questions from the comment section. I'll be addressing each. I'll be addressing each of the questions. The mind is a highly complex thing, and there are let me just say the conditions that relate to the mind is very hard to treat. Thought processes, emotions, memories, dreams, perceptions, and so on cannot be seen physically like the skin or the human body. It is very important to know that psychologists have several roles to play, and it is also very, crucial to understand what exactly we mean by psychology. Psychology can be said to be the study of the human mind and mental processes. So, psychology evolves around the mind. And like I said earlier on, the human mind is a very complex thing. And all the conditions that relate to the mind is always very difficult to treat. Please, I as I explain all these things, please do not forget to always click the like button, and let's see how far we can go. So the field of psychology involves studying things like memory, dreams, perceptions, emotions, and even human thoughts. Psychology is very complex. It is a very complex field. It is a very complex field. And psychologists have various roles to perform. Various roles. They carry out studies, even in several situations, to advise, possibly, let me say, health authorities, advise social organizations, provide strategies to solving the problems of the mind. We have various branches of psychology because each of these branches serves different purposes. So there is no fixed way of classifying the branches of psychology, but I will briefly explain some of them. One is clinical psychology, and clinical psychology integrates science, theory, and practices in order to understand, predict, relieve problems with adjustment and discomfort. And it in turn promotes adaptation, adjustment, and personal development. Clinical psychologist concentrates on intellectual, emotional, biological, psychological, social, and behavioral aspects of human performance throughout a person's life. It also varies according to cultures and socioeconomic levels. Clinical psychology can help us to understand, prevent, and also alleviate psychologically caused distress of dysfunctions. of the human mind, and it in turn promotes an individual's well-being and personal development. So psychological assessments, or let me just also psychotherapy, are central to the practice of clinical psychology. But clinical psychologists are often involved, in research, training, forensic, testimony, and other areas of human mind. We also have what we call cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology involves internal mental processes such as problem solving, memory, learning, and language. This branch of psychology looks at how people perceive, think, communicate, remember, and learn. It is closely related to neuroscience, philosophy, linguistics, etc. So, cognitive psychologists look at how people acquire processes and store information. The practical aspects of cognitive psychology um, include how to promote or how to improve memory. It increases the accuracy of decision making, or how to set up certain programs to boost learning. We also have what we call developmental psychology. This is simply the scientific study of systematic psychological changes that a person may experience over one's lifetime or lifespan. It's in most instances also referred to as human development. This branch of psychology focuses not only on infants and infants and young children, but also teenagers and adults and even older persons. Factors that are studied under this branch of psychology involves motor skills, problem solving, moral understanding, acquiring language, emotions, personality, self-concept, and identity, formation. This branch of psychology focuses majorly on the innate mental structures against learning through, experience, or how a person's features or characteristics interact with environmental factors and how this impacts on development. So developmental psychology overlaps with fields such as linguistics and others. We also have what we call forensic psychology. Forensic psychology involves applying psychology to criminal investigation and the law. A forensic psychologist practices psychology as a science within the criminal justice system and civil courts. What do I mean by criminal justice system? Criminal justice system involves the police, the courts, and the correctional services or prisons, as it may be called, as in some countries of the world. So this forensic psychology involves an assessment of the various psychological factors that might influence a case or behavior, and presenting the findings possibly in the law court. We have neuropsychology. Neuropsychology simply looks at the structure and the function of the brain, and this is studied in relation to behaviors and psychological processes. A neuropsychologist may be involved if, let me say, a condition involves problems of the brain, or an assessment that involves recording certain electrical activities within the human brain. So neuropsychological evaluation is mostly used in determining whether a person is likely to experience behavioral problems following various suspected or diagnosed brain injury. For instance, stroke. You agree with me that those who suffer from stroke always have a kind of distortion within their brain. And the results can enable a doctor to provide treatments that may help individuals achieve possible improvements in cognitive damage that must have occurred within the brain system. We also have social psychology. The word social, anywhere you see the word social, it means society. So, social psychology is a branch of sociology, or a branch of psychology rather, that involves the study of how individuals' way of life, how individuals' sense of dialogue, or how our various ways of behavior is shaped by the presence of other people around us. It simply means our thoughts, beliefs, behaviors can be shaped or can be influenced by the presence of individuals around us. In a nutshell, it involves the study of how group behavior influences individual behavior. Social psychologists use scientific methods to understand how social influences impact on human behavior. It seeks to explain how feelings, behaviors, and thoughts are influenced by the actual, imagined, or implied presence of other people. A social psychologist in most cases looks at group behavior, social perception, non-verbal behavior, conformity, aggression, prejudice, and leadership. Social perception and social interactions are seen as key understanding in trying to find out why people behave the way they do. So the field of psychology is complex on its own, and it is very wide. It is very, very, very wide. So it entails various aspects of human mind. So the branches are many: educational psychology, forensic psychology, social psychology, cognitive psychology, occupational psychology, neuropsychology, health psychology, forensic psychology, evolutionary psychology, and let me also add developmental psychology. So then in the field of psychology, there is a serious debate of nature versus nurture. Nature debate versus nurture. The nature versus nurture debate in psychology involves the extent to which a particular aspect of behavior are a product of either inherited, let's say genetic problems, or acquired learned. When I say nature, you are talking about factors that are inherited, something that is genetic. And when I say nurture, you are talking about things that are learned or through other form of influences. So nature in most instances is what we think of as let me say a kind of pre-wiring, and it is mostly influenced by genetic inheritance and other biological factors. Nurture is generally taken, or is generally understood, as the influence of external factors after conception. For instance, the product of exposure, life experiences, and learning on an individuals. So behavioral genetics over the years has enabled psychology to quantify the relative contribution of the relative contribution of nature and nurture concerning specific psychological traits. So instead of defending extreme nativist or nurturist views, most psychological researchers are now interested in investigating how nature and nurture interact in a host of qualitatively different ways. For example, Epigenetics is an emerging area of research that shows how environmental influences affect the expression of genes. So the nature nurture debate is concerned with the relative contribution that influences, human behavior, such as personality, cognitive traits, temperament, and possibly psychopathology. There are various approaches to the study of nature and nurture. We have biological approach. Biological approach mainly focus on genetic, hormonal, and neurochemical explanations of behavior. That is for the biological approach. Then we equally have the psychoanalysis or psychoanalytic approach. This examines the innate drives of, let me say, sex and aggression, or some form of social upbringing during childhood. That's nurture. We also have the cognitive approach. This refers to the innate mental structures such as perception and memory, and this constantly changed by the environment. We equally have humanistic approach. When you go to humanistic approach, you talk about people like Abraham Maslow. Maslow emphasized so much on basic physical needs and how society influences a person's self-conception. Then we also have what we call behavioral approach. All behavior is learned through environment, through conditioning. So, nativist, their basic assumption is that the characteristics of the human species as a whole are product of evolution, and that individual differences are due to each person's unique genetic code. So in general, the earlier a particular ability appears, the more likely it is to be under the influence of a genetic factor. So estimates of genetic influence are called heritability. Examples of extreme nature positions in psychology includes the work of Chomsky in 1965. He proposed a language that is gained through the use of an innate language acquisition device. Another example of nature is Freud's theory of aggression, being an innate drive called thanatos. There are also characteristics and differences that are not observable at birth, but these factors emerge later in life, and they are often regarded as the product of maturation. So when you now talk of nurture, you are talking about empiricism, like things that involve scientific knowledge. At the other end of spectrum are the environmentalists, who are also known as empiricists, not to be confused with other empirical or scientific approach. The basic assumption of those empiricists is that at birth the human mind is tabula rasa. When you say the human mind is tabula rasa, you are talking about a blank state, a brain that is empty, something that is empty. It is, nobody knows anything. So, but gradually the brain is filled as a result of experience. So from this point of view, psychological characteristics and behavioral differences that emerge through infancy and childhood are as a result of learning, and it is how you are brought up in context, nurture, that governs the psychological significant aspects of a child's development, and the concept of maturation applies only to the biological factors. There are various evidences of nature, biological approach, medical model, and all sorts of models. We equally went further during the semester, examining the concept of personality. And what exactly is personality? You are talking about an individual's unique entity resulting from the interaction between let me say a person and its environment. And this can clearly be understood in terms of behavior, actions, postures, words, attitudes, and opinions. Personality can also, be described as an individual's hidden feelings about the external world. So there are various components of personality: openness to experience, conscientious people, extraversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, emotionality, and some other factors. Let me quickly make reference to psychoanalytic theory, because if you look at psychoanalytic theory postulates a multitude of different change mechanisms and a host of new ways of conceptualizing the change process that continue to emerge as psychoanalytic theories. So, at the most basic level, there is an understanding that change generally involves making unconscious conscious, as expressed by Sigmund Freud. He said, where it has been there shall ego be. Although Sigmund Freud's understanding of the nature of change process evolved over the course of his lifetime, and let me say central to his mature thinking was the idea that change involves how will I put it? It involves first becoming aware of our instinctual impulses. When I say instinctual impulses, our inside impulse, like, then coupled with unconscious wishes, and then learning to deal with them. We are learning to deal with them in a mature, rational, and reflective fashion. For Sigmund Freud, a central premise was that we are driven by unconscious wishes that we are unaware of, and this lack of awareness results in driven or self-defeating behavior. Sigmund Freud believed that we delude ourselves about reasons for our behaviors and self-deception. So this self-deception limits our choice. So by becoming unaware of our unconscious wishes and defenses against them, we increase the choices available to us. Thus, as we decrease the extent to which we are driven by unconscious factors, we assume a greater degree of let me say a greater degree of consciousness. So therefore, it is very important to understand all the postulations of Sigmund Freud as regards to psychoanalytic theory. Furthermore, we went further by looking at the concept of socialization. What exactly do we mean by socialization? We are talking about the lifelong process that involves the transformation of individuals from a biological organism into a social organism. What do I mean by this? Like we said earlier on, that at birth, the human mind is tabula rasa. Nobody knows anything. Everybody brain was in a blank state. But as we continue to grow, we begin to learn the acquired, accepted norms and values of the society. What are the various types of socialization? One is anticipatory. Let me start by examining primary socialization. Primary socialization is that type of socialization that takes place within the family as a social institution at the preliminary level. The family is a typical example of primary socialization. Then we also have secondary socialization. A good example of secondary socialization is group. The kind of socialization, the kind of process of learning norms, values, rules, regulations that are acceptable by the society at group level. Then we have anticipatory socialization. Anticipatory socialization involves a kind of socialization that has to do with rehearsals. Maybe you need to rehearse for future purpose. For instance, you want to be, you want to become a teacher. Then at 100 2 3 you begin to gather your classmates, put them through the various processes of tutorial, put them through the various processes of socialization, putting them through the various processes of learning. We equally have resocialization. Resocialization involves um, learning. Sorry, resocialization involves learning, unlearning, and relearning. It is possible that after you have learned a lot of things and you have a bad behavior, there is every certainty that you may want to drop that behavior and pick up another one. However, the behavior could be a good one, and at the same time, it could it could be it could be a bad one. So it is always very important to take cognizance of the fact that the process of socialization is lifelong. It involves learning from birth till you die. We equally looked or examined the concept of learning. And learning, according to psychologists, is the process of is a process that leads to a permanent, let me just say, a relatively permanent behavioral change or potential behavioral change. In other words, as we learn, we alter the way we perceive our environment, the way we interpret the incoming stimuli, and therefore the way we interact or behave. John B. Watson, 1878 to 1958, was the first to study how the processes of learning affect our behavior, and he informed the school of thought known as behaviorism. The central idea behind behaviorism is that only observable behaviors are worthy of research, since abstractions such as person's mood or thoughts are too subjective. So this belief was mostly dominant in the field of psychological research in the United States for about 50 years. Well, perhaps the most known, let me just say, the most well-known behaviorist is B.F. Skinner, who lived between the year 1904 to 1990. Skinner followed much of Watson's research and findings, but believed that internal states could influence behavior just as external stimuli. So he is considered to be the radical behaviorist. Well, this online class is just a means of revision because we have just few hours to the judgment day. So throughout the semester, we're able to examine the concept of psychology, which we said is the scientific study of the human mind and mental processes. We went further by examining the various branches of the field of psychology. This involves cognitive psychology, experimental psychology, school or educational psychology, developmental psychology, forensic psychology, and all sorts of branches. We examine the concept of socialization. We also examine approaches to the study, of psychology. We were also able to look at the concept of socialization, the meaning, the types, and the importance. We also examine the concept of learning. We examine habitual learning, operant, classical conditioning, and other various types of learning. And we were able to contrast the position, or we're able to examine operant and classical conditioning. That is the work of Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner. So please, I need you to drop your questions because this is a revision class. Somebody just asked now that I should help with the concept of personality. I said earlier on that when you talk about personality, you are talking about those distinguishing features that differentiates individuals. I am Lakunle Oluwaseun Ibrahim. You have your name. We have features that differentiate us, despite the fact that we are all human beings. So, an individual's personality is a unique entity that results from the interaction between you. Let me say that involves the interaction between a person and his environment. And this can only be understood in terms of a person's behaviors, actions, postures, words, attitudes, and opinion. Therefore, your personality is different from mine. What you do is different from mine. What distinguishes you is different from you and I is different. Our way of behavior is different. Our sense of dialogue is different. What we do is different. Therefore, personality itself is dynamic in nature. It is subject to changes because we all have different life experiences that shapes our personality. The person who said it, then somebody said I should throw more light on learning. I have said it that at the mention of the word learning, what are you trying to examine? You are examining the processes. Yeah, yeah. Sophia Peters said I should throw more light on learning. When you, at the mention of the word learning, you are talking about the processes that leads to a relatively permanent behavioral change or a potential behavioral change. What do I mean by this? I'm trying to say that as you learn, whatever you learn will alter the way you perceive environment. Because man, they say in the field of sociology, is a product of his environment. So whatever you learn will definitely change your behavior. So learning involves things that alter, or the way that alter the way we perceive our environment, the way we interpret the incoming stimuli, and therefore the way we interact or behavior. Adiola Israel said, at transfers of learning, metacognition and problem-based learning part of the complex form of learning. Yes, because the learning process is complex. It is very, very, very complex. It is very, 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 very complex. It is very. So please, like I said, this is a revision class. Please ask your question. Somebody said, please explain associative operant condition and classical condition and non-associative learning habituation. And when you say habituation, you are talking about processes that involve acquiring certain ways of life based on what you see. Operant conditioning and classical conditioning are various types of learning as postulated by Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner. So it involves a kind of stimulation. It involves a kind of stimulation of acquiring knowledge that will permanently or relatively, change your behavior. Please continue to ask questions because this is a revision class and we just have limited time to spend here because you need to read. Please drop your questions. Please drop your questions. Someone said, you said only observable behavior are worthy of research. Does this mean that when a behavior is not complicated, it is not worthy of research? You can only research on what you see. You can't research on what you have not seen. It is only a problem that you understand, a problem that you have seen, that you can research on. Someone said the ego under the structure. Yes, it is under the structure of personality. Please continue to drop. Then someone said, I really want to know where the mind is located. Well, that's a very funny question. When you say the human mind is located within the human body. I cannot point specifically at the place where the human mind is. All I know is that the human mind is located in the body system. Please, your questions, please. Excuse me, please. Questions, please.